Good evening. I want to thank the staff at Bellarmine for inviting me to share some thoughts with you this evening. I agree with what Pope Francis shared in his message for World Day of Migrants and Refugees, which we are celebrating today. When we talk about migrants and displaced persons, all too often we stop at statistics. But it is not about statistics. It is about real people. If we encounter them, we will get to know more about them. And knowing their stories, we will be able to understand them. So I want to share some personal stories. And as I gathered my thoughts on this, I realized that what I really want to talk about is motherhood. My 9-month-old daughter, Izzy, has already transformed my life. And as a new mom, with the 19th anniversary of my own mom's death coming up in a couple weeks, motherhood is on my mind and heart. As Bellarmine focuses on engaging active disciples, my mom, as usual, comes to mind as a role model for me. She had internalized the exhortation from today's second reading. Humbly regard others as more important than yourselves, each looking out not for one's own interests, but also for those of others. I remember her teaching religious ed to children with disabilities, writing letters to the editor against the death penalty, taking communion to the homebound, and the list goes on. I also remember often coming home from school to find her praying in the living room, getting nourishment to sustain and guide her work. When she was killed in a car accident when I was 16, my world was shattered. I cried for my own loss and for the pain the rest of my family faced, but I also cried for all the countless others she touched, knowing that really her death was a loss for the world. As I turned to God in prayer in the weeks and months after she passed away, I felt called to step up and try to fill the enormous void she left behind. I got involved with social justice work, and much of that over the years has involved working with immigrants. One of the most impactful experiences I've had was in December of 2018, when, with financial support from Bellarmine, I traveled with my husband, John, an immigrant from England, who is also an immigration attorney, to a detention center for women and children in Dilley, Texas. We spent a week meeting with mothers, John as the attorney and me as his Spanish interpreter, and helping them identify which pieces of their stories could qualify them for asylum so that they could have a better chance at being released from detention and pursuing their asylum cases in the US. The week was exhausting and heartbreaking, but it was an amazing privilege to get to meet these courageous, selfless mothers who had given up everything to try to keep their children safe. We were touched by their vulnerability in sharing their stories of the most terrifying, intimate, and traumatic moments of their lives. One of the mothers we met, I'll call her Carolina, was there with her 17-year-old daughter. Even before she had to flee her home in Honduras, she had endured more heartache than anyone should have to. She suffered decades of physical, sexual, and verbal abuse from her husband. And though she called the police time and again, when he hit her and her daughter, after he chased her with a machete, or the time he locked them in a room and then poured gas all over the house, but she was able to grab the matches from him just in time, he was only in jail for 24 hours each time. On top of that, her son was murdered at age 23. So when her 17-year-old daughter was approached by a Barrio 18 gang member asking her to be his girlfriend, threatening in graphic detail how he would kill her if she didn't agree, Carolina didn't waste any time to see what would happen next. She left everything she had and everything she'd known, her family, her home, her business, her country, to keep her daughter safe. They were gone within a week. I saw Jesus' face in Carolina and in the face of every mother we met that week. What a gift it was for me to get to know him better through them. As Pope Francis said, in each of these people, forced to flee to safety, Jesus is present, as he was at the time of Herod, in the faces of the hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the sick, strangers and prisoners. We are called to see the face of Christ who pleads with us to help. If we can recognize him in those faces, we will be the ones to thank him for having been able to meet, love, and serve him in them. Our daughter Izzy was born last December, and she has brought us unimaginable joy, provided constant entertainment, and completely taken over our lives. I'm now staying home with her, and leading up to that, I looked forward to all the time I'd have for volunteering. At different points in my life, I've often felt like the second son in today's gospel, who says yes and later does nothing. I learn about issues, problems, needs, and I want to help, so I tell myself, or God, or Tim, that I will, and then life gets overwhelming, and I end up just focused on me. That's happened since Izzy was born more than ever, and I find myself turning again to prayer as I discern how I can be an active disciple as a mother. When the problems seem too big and the state of our country and the world is so depressing that my instinct is to huddle in a corner with my little family and ignore everything outside, prayer is one action I can take to find the strength and courage to keep trying to do my part. I also have to keep reminding myself that as Izzy grows, I am living out discipleship as I raise her to also have a heart for migrants and refugees. As I discern this path forward as a mother, there's another role model I'll be looking to. Glenda, the inspiring woman from El Salvador I've had the privilege of becoming friends with over the last few years through Bellarmine's sponsorship of her family as they seek asylum. Many of you have gotten to know Glenda's family since they arrived in 2017, and I know you'll agree that their faith and resilience are awe-inspiring. Though Glenda has been through unimaginable tragedy, and even as she and Jorge face the pressures of raising two small kids with so much uncertainty and fear about their family's future, I've been struck by her generosity and commitment to giving back. I once saw, for example, that she had gathered up some of her kids' clothes and paid to ship them to a friend in need who had migrated to California. One of the truest examples of active discipleship I've seen. I hope that with renewed commitment and prayer, I'll be able to overcome the barriers to action and become an ever more active disciple, so that I can be the example to Izzy that my mom was to me, and that Glenda is to Nayeli, Barkley, and Vanessa. And I hope you will all join me in this effort as a community to say yes to the call to welcome migrants, and then to follow through on that yes through prayer, advocacy, service, and relationship.